recording, so people will need to accept that if they want to stay. And welcome everyone. I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself and turn it over to Greg or Dave.
Actually, Dave is going to start it off for us. And I am going to bring up my slides first. How about that? And then Dave can, because I've got a slide for Dave. So. Right. Dave, you ready?
Yes, yes. Well, thank you all for attending this update. And I just wanted to review the auction, which many of you may have been at, but it worked out really well. It was a big success from a financial standpoint. I think we got donations of over $40,000. So from that standpoint, it's very successful. I think the new facility at the Jefferson Park was very good, and everybody seemed to enjoy themselves. So again, thank you for attending and thank you for your support. Okay, Greg.
Thank you, Dave. It was great seeing everybody. And I'm very glad to have folks on here today because I'm going to throw out some ideas for you. And I really want input because we're thinking some big things here and we need to test out ideas. Thanks to the capacity grant, we're now able to take on regional issues. If we're ever going to protect Southern Maryland's ecosystem, our rural lands, we have to think big. We need a change in perspectives about the real economic assets of our region. An old real estate maxim has said that the three most important things when looking at property are location, location, location. For business, transportation access is key. And large portions of Southern Maryland have not been able to compete for manufacturing, warehouses, and corporate enterprises, except for maybe the service industry, with our limited access to rail, commercial airports, and interstate highways. But for centuries, that did not matter. The economy was focused around two industries that could thrive on a peninsula or peninsulas, farming and fishing. Rolling roads were used to haul farm products to landings, and sailboats carried goods and passengers much more easily than traveling over rugged dirt roads with gates wherever there was a road crossing a property line. Those two industries are still here, though not nearly as prominent as 100 years ago. Tobacco barns still dot the landscape. Grain has replaced tobacco. There are still workboats on the water. The Marine Museum does a great job of documenting the history and will continue to, I hope. And both farming and fisheries industries have experienced a rebound in the 21st century, even though it's a modest one. In part due to the local food movement, and the latter due to a slowly improving Chesapeake Bay water quality improvements. Even by the dawn of the 20th century, land travel was challenging throughout Maryland, but particularly in Southern Maryland. The best form of transportation was the steamboat, which Ralph Eshelman knows a little bit about. The steamboat plied the waters of Chesapeake Bay from 1813 to almost 1940. And for a time there were nearly 600 vessels that reached 300 locations. Pretty amazing. So then, after World War II, Maryland underwent the same kind of housing boom as many other areas in the country. In fact, we were the third fastest. The first wave of government expansion brought in new government workers from all over the nation. Developers found that many farmers were willing to sell, as the farmers were having difficulty by that time in competing with the much larger farms in the Midwest and West. And then in 1956, President Eisenhower signed legislation funding the interstate highway system, which allowed commuters to live even further away from cities and from their jobs in general. Now, new residential development didn't pay its way. And so elected officials in rural areas tried to bring in manufacturing, office parks, and more recently, even high tech to rural areas. However, manufacturers and warehouses don't want to come to these areas unless they are near to an interstate highway or rail or airport facilities. And so the industrial parks and office parks in rural areas without these good transportation options often took decades to fill out, or if they filled out at all. And then eventually, many of the uses were not suited to the original purpose. So it's still a challenge for local governments, particularly in rural areas, to find an economy that works for them. What should the future of Southern Maryland's economy be like? What are our natural assets? Well, because of our relative isolation, rugged lands, land preservation programs, Southern Maryland still has much of its wildlife habitat in place, and potentially great access to coves, creeks, rivers, and the Chesapeake Bay. And you know, when the Europeans started to colonize Maryland, they settled first near the water in Southern Maryland and on the Eastern Shore. The areas closest to the bay grew first because of proximity to good water access. For example, Calvert was established in 1654, Frederick not until 1748, as roads and all improved. So thinking again about what are our natural assets, one of them has to be the fact that we do have wildlife habitats available, and we have what the Nature Conservancy, some of the most resilient lands in all of Maryland. If you look at the key to the right, you see dark green is the most resilient, brown is the least resilient, and gray is already developed. And so for this region, if you're looking for nearby access to visit and see wildlife, or to fish, or to do so many other things, well, Southern Maryland is potentially the great place to go if the infrastructure then comes into play. And the green tourism in the United States is really big. Hiking, biking, hunting, fishing, water sports, and outdoor activities generate nearly $900 billion in consumer spending annually. That's the fourth highest industry in the nation in terms of generation of income. And trails can not only take credit for a good portion of that impact, but also for the other benefits to the society, the recreational benefits. And just in terms of how it can affect a rural area, look at Dorchester, Maryland. Nature tourism contributes $367 million to local economy, and that creates 7,000 full-time equivalent jobs. Now, Calvert is particularly suited for wildlife habitat with its microclimates, large wooded areas, and access to water. Looking for the future of Calvert, I think that there is real potential, but we're not there yet. We do have a wide diversity of species. And when you're looking to see an endangered, threatened species, we have the nature there. We have the habitat to support a lot of these creatures. So why do we need green tourism? Other than the economy, most people living in Calvert County never see a waterway except for crossing the river in Prince George's County or when you get all the way to the south end at Solomon's. They have no idea what watershed they live in, nor will they be likely to care about the health of the waterways or wildlands that they never get access to. ACLT's byline has always been connecting people to the land, or actually to land and water, but it can also serve as green tourism for birders, hikers, and kayakers if we are able to connect people to land and water better and get them to know what they can't see from Route 4. So what do we need to improve green tourism? Longer hiker trails, more bikeable roads and trails, more canoe and kayak launch sites, more local businesses and landowners involved in all of these things. And we need a vision. When it comes to visions, one guy who had a really big one, and that was Benton Mackay, who thought really large scale when he conceived of the Appalachian Trail running from Maine all the way to Georgia. But people grabbed onto that vision, and all up and down that corridor, the trail started to be developed. And now it is not only a major economic asset, but it's also such a huge natural asset because all those areas have been protected. And our leaders, first ACLT and then the county, began to imagine a trail from Prince Frederick to the Bay. And it took 10 years to happen, but through concerted efforts by a number of people, county and ACLT included, we were able to establish the Prince Frederick to Bay Trail. You know, people want rugged hikes and long hikes to challenge them, but there are also some people who want flatter lands, and Calvert has that too, some in the county and state parks. You know, variety matters. And this quote out of the Land Protection Parks Recreation Plan says that this is consistent with county plans too, to develop an interconnected system of pedestrian trails and bike paths throughout Calvert County. So what about a river to bay trail? We've talked about it for some time. We have the trail from the bay to Prince Frederick. Now we need to establish a line from Prince Frederick to the river, and it could either go to Hunting Creek or Hollowing Point or to Battle Creek. Many possibilities, and if we, with the support of the county, we can begin to look into the possibilities of making that happen, and wouldn't that be exciting? And what about bicycling? Well, a nonprofit also had a big vision in 1991. It was to come up with a 3,000-mile trail from Maine to Georgia. By golly, it's already in place. It's already been identified. And now they're working on improvements, safety improvements, and detours. What about an option that would detour it through Southern Maryland? You know, in Maryland, we already have 22 partner groups that are engaged in this effort, including the Maryland Transportation Authority. So it's already getting serious treatment. These, for example, are 3 additions to the East Coast Greenway, major projects that were just opened up this year. And we have plans now for improving some of those road access points to make them even safer for bicyclists. And we would have work to do in Southern Maryland to make safer accesses if this were embraced by everybody. And it is good to note that Governor Hogan just signed $35 million in grants for 53 bicycle, pedestrian, and trail projects across the state, including 3 major grants to bicycle groups to expand trails. So now, what about paddling? Well, the county plans say provide expanded and improved access to the Chesapeake Bay and Protection River and support the establishment of destination accommodations and dining to draw overnight accommodations. And there's already a vision for that too, the Captain John Smith Historical Trail. And you see all the winding curves that Captain John Smith did, and I think it was 1608 or 9. I'm pretty sure that Ralph can get that straight for me at the end. But some time ago, I think it was in several different trips. Captain John Smith covered all this territory, including a number of destinations in Southern Maryland. And these sites have already been documented, and it'd be great to have these as part of the vision of what we want to accomplish, is to get better access to them. So we have so many beautiful water trails in Southern Maryland. Shouldn't there, for example, be good public access for kayaks to Hunting Creek? This is the group that Bob belongs to, and but in order for this paddle to happen, it has to happen over private lands. We need to make these available for the public too. And the same thing about St. Leonard Creek. There is an access point at the mouth, but it's a little bit more challenging there with winds and tides. It'd be great to have an access point more at the headwaters. And then imagine this, if we're trying to think big. Imagine if steamboats returned as solar electric boats over dozens of locations. The boats could accommodate hikers and bicycles too, connecting neighboring counties. And eventually, and I do believe this is going to happen, what if all recreational boats, or nearly all of them over time, were converted to solar? Electric boats run so much more efficiently. They don't break down. They're not reliant on fossil fuels. And I think just by the idea of convenience and affordability, we will see this transition. But I see that steamboats to solar electric boats is a doable thing, and that would be the more efficient way to improve connections to places. And guess what? The county zoning regulations already allow canoe and kayak access points off of private property. And as a conditional use, they allow overnight accommodations with primitive campsites on private properties. So you could picture how we could really expand the number of access points up and down the Patuxent River on private properties. And then if you needed to camp, I could envision races down the entire Patuxent River, canoe and kayak races, with access points for people if they needed to pull off. And all of this ties in very well with Calvert's efforts to promote agritourism, heritage tourism, and a local food system. You know, nonprofits have had a history of getting things done in Calvert County, getting things started. Creation of the Marine Museum was initiated by the Calvert Historical Society. Battle Creek Cypress Swamp has been working with Calvert Nature Society to make major expansions and improvements. And then ACLT, the creation of the Prince Frederick Bay Trail, are just 3 examples of the kinds of partnerships. And the great thing is that nonprofits can do what a lot of times governments can't do. And that is sometimes initiate new ideas. Oops. And then we have, for regional connections, we have the Southern Maryland Conservation Alliance. It realizes that rural lands must have economic use, or lands are often developed. And so the member organizations are willing to help with this kind of green tourism effort as well. And as environmentalists, we need this. We need advocates for our lands and waters if we stand a chance of slowing or stopping residential sprawl into Southern Maryland. People of all ages, races, genders, and ethnicities need to have access to trails and waterways before they are more likely to stand up to protect nature. So with that, I am going to stop sharing. And I'd love to hear a little bit of a conversation about what all you think about my crazy ideas.
If anyone needs to be unmuted, let me know. Steve, you're already unmuted. You have something to tell us? Oh, Ralph does.
Well, I don't mind. Number one, I think it's a great idea. Why didn't we do this 10 years ago? I don't want to talk about lost opportunities, but some of you may know that the county did have a chance to purchase the first St. Leonard's town site. And part of the purpose of that was for kayaking and boating accessibility to St. Leonard's Creek. And Denny Murray, who bought it, was willing to sell it to the county at the same price that he bought it for. And the county commissioners at that time did not have the foresight to accept that offer, which to me was a really big shame. Most good bicycle trails tend to be placed on what used to be railroad grades because they're easy. There are not a lot of hills. And guess what? We have a railroad grade in Calvert County that most people have completely forgotten about, the Drum Point Railroad. It was never developed, but the grade was completed. And that grade, by the way, went right through the Denny Murray property that is now developed, unfortunately. But there's possibilities there. There's ways to get around some of that. Just another thing off the top of my head, the Patuxent River keeper, Fred Tutman, is always looking for additions to kayaking and canoeing put-in sites, and I know he would be very supportive. I don't know how many of you in the audience are familiar with Dave Lithicum, but Dave did this amazing paddler's map of the Patuxent River, and he is a big advocate of this and is always looking for sites. And he pointed out to me pretty much what has already been said, that we don't have a good access site for the upper St. Leonard's Creek, and we don't have any for Helen Creek, which is kind of interesting. I could go on and on. I don't want to hog it because I know there's a lot of people here, but just to let you know, I'm very much in favor of this, and I just don't know why we haven't done it years ago.
Not enough volunteers.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the Patuxent River does have water access only campsites. Boy Scouts use it a lot. But it only extends so far. It'd be nice to be able to extend that further south. And maybe on both sides of the river.
Even better. Yeah. And as you go north,
But as you know, I've talked often about.
I was just gonna say, as you go north, there's a lot of public parks on the western shore of the Patuxent that we could potentially get into if we worked out a deal with them, because there's a lot of public lands on that side.
Right. There's some real opportunities there. We don't have quite as many opportunities on our side. King's Landing can get you to some of the water access only. We've used that often. There's a water access only a mile across the river from there. But going south, it could be a way to get south as well. But I guess also I was noticing the bicycle map, the long bicycle map from north to south. It's rather, what do I want to say? It makes me mad that it doesn't cross the Potomac at the right place, because the state of Maryland decided not to add reasonable bike lanes across the new bridge, the new nice bridge.
Yeah.
And I talked to the deputy secretary, I guess he was here, and I asked him about that. He says, well, it's 3 feet wide, the bicycle access. I'm like, yeah, I want to be 3 feet away from a tractor trailer sucking me into the traffic. That sounds like a good idea. But he says that some better things might be happening. We'll see.
Well, what about one of those solar electric boats to be a ferry? Frank, you've got your hand up.
Sure, Greg, I guess, well, first of all, I would love a Nance Cove style opportunity to get on Honey Creek somewhere. We got to figure out how to make that happen. And I guess I'd be curious, how ACLT and maybe even the alliance between the friends groups, for example, could advocate for that through the county. So I'm curious to hear about that. But I think my question for you would be like, well, where do we start? Right? So we've gotten some momentum going, I think, with the friends group. The alliance has been set up. What do you think is a good next milestone for us to try to achieve?
I think we need to start talking to the counties. Yep. As a matter of fact,
Specifically, okay, go ahead.
I'm going to, actually, I was thrilled that the new economic development director for Calvert County reached out to ACLT to say, hey, can we talk? So I think we have good beginnings there, and we'll just have to see what anything comes out of that. But it needs to be a coordinated effort. And I think we'll also need to work with a lot of different specialty groups. There's a lot of bicycle groups. We need to make them advocates for something like this. There's 800 members to the Solomons bicycling group. There's a lot of hikers, a lot of birders, organizations, and we just need to develop, all these constituencies that are saying this is what needs to happen. But if this goes forward, if the board keeps allowing us to do this, I would like to see us reach out to a lot of people and see some things happen sooner than later.
A quick follow-up, Greg. So you're presenting this to us as donors because of the presumably the support you would like us to give to it. But what proportion of the effort of ACLT would you say is going to this? The funding that we're paying for salaries and folks' time to do stuff, because you got to take care of the land and all the other things that have to happen as well.
Well, because of the capacity grant, we were able to add 2 staffers and one of those staffers was to expand on how we manage the land. And we're looking into beaver dam analogs and other tools to better manage water on the land. And then we also have Mary Hoover, our very dynamic regional coordinator, who is reaching out to the 35 groups on a daily basis, including Hunting Creek and all, the 4 friends groups we have, to build the constituency. So yeah, every day she's on it, and I'm on it for the amount of time I can put on it.
Greg, has she reached out to the Cove Point Heritage Trust? That would be an access point for canoe and kayak.
They're one of our members too. Yep. That's a great idea, though. I hadn't thought. They do have land on the water there.
Yeah, and they're probably going to develop it pretty quickly. So it's probably time sensitive to approach them now if we're going to try something like that.
I love that idea. Thank you. See, already another good idea.
So with Bay Access, we do have, well, it used to be new. It's not as new property that goes out to the bay. Now I know it ends at a cliff, and no, I haven't designed the zip line down to the shore yet. But I don't know. Are there any possibilities?
Talk about tough spots. I think it would be better off to buy another property because that is the highest cliff in that area that we bought. It's 800 feet of cliff that we own. There's not one spot that gets you down there. Plus, the cliffs tops are pretty highly erodible. So you really got to be careful about anything that you do near the top of the cliff. Where you get that one-time great slide to the water.
Right. Well, that's it. A giant water slide to the bay. Great idea.
All right, Robin, do we have anybody else? I can't see all the hands. Do you have?
Nobody's raising their hands.
Other comments then?
Feel free to unmute yourself.
So Greg,
Anybody have- Oh, go ahead.
I did have that somewhat fanciful park that was right across from sort of like the library area. And, you know, I threw that out there just in case, you know, it might get some interest from the people that want to develop that land. But in terms of a place where you would have a low impact hiking park with access to businesses, if you wanted to combine the two, there's a whole region of undeveloped land in there. Do you have any ideas for that place?
I actually was thinking about that yesterday. I think we need a lot of partners to make it happen.
Right.
But that is a very nice piece of land, and it would do, you see, really, the residents of Prince Frederick have very little recreational access.
That's what I was thinking.
And so I see merit to them making that happen. So what we would need to do is come up with a really reasonable offer that they thought that they would be getting a deal. I think the county would have to pay probably the price of what the developers paid for it. But I think that's worth pursuing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because there's so many people right there even that could be served in those high density developments. In addition, maybe bringing some people in from the outside that could have a nice day trip.
And the county, if I'm not mistaken, has been collecting recreation fees for land in lieu of recreation on all those apartment buildings. There should be a pot of money that could go for something like this. So,
Yeah.
So did
Okay.
anybody see weaknesses in my arguments? Because what I need to do, I wanted to use you guys as guinea pigs, because as we move up the line, I want to have a very defensible presentation. What do you think?
I think the standard argument is going to be all the challenges we have with privately owned land and lack of access. You know, I love the idea of using, you know, the old rail bed for a trailway, but who's going to offer that up on a consistent basis, right? I would personally love to back up to something like that, right? You know, a nice walkable area, right? The people that are on bike trails are usually, you know, pretty responsible people. I wouldn't feel very threatened by that, but you know, obviously you're giving up some of your, you know, property and that value, I guess. So I guess I'm just thinking though, in terms of the water access or trails or what have you, isn't that what people are going to come out with, you with at first?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm not sure I would call this a weakness, but some of you may know that there was an effort, and I'm going to say it was 15 years ago, to try to designate the Patuxent River a national scenic river. It is considered a state scenic river, which really carries nothing on it except the title. And we ran into opposition primarily from the farmers, who did not want any government interdiction on telling them what they could or could not do with their land. So I'm just kind of raising that sometimes when you want to do things like that, there are some people who don't want more people coming to their creek, coming to their river, whatever it might be. So you just need to be cognizant of it and be open that, yeah, there's pros and cons to everything, but be prepared on how to answer that, because you will get some criticism from some people.
So I wonder if talking about the sort of an increase in property values with when you have these sorts of amenities nearby would be useful to include. I don't know. Okay,
and I can do that too, but I'll go back to what Ralph was saying. I think that's where nonprofits though can come in. Because you're exactly right. And I'll give you another example of just what you're talking about. The county commissioners actually had a contract on a beautiful piece of land on Hunting Creek. And it didn't even get to public hearing before the neighbors got to the commissioners and stopped it. But here's the deal. What if we were to do just like, for example, what the Nature Conservancy did in buying the Goldstein property? Nonprofits can do what governments can't do. In other words, because the neighboring property owners can't stop a nonprofit from buying a property. But so a nonprofit could buy it, even with county support, even with other money, other financial support. The nonprofit can buy it. And when it becomes a success, they can turn it back to the county. So or sell it back to the county. Those would be kind of the strategies I'd be looking at, because I realize, as a matter of fact, sitting working for the county over years, I could see the intense pressure that they would get sometimes, and trying to do the right thing. I wish they had held the public hearing, because they might have gotten an awful lot of public support for it. But it can be so intense that they don't want to fight that fight. Nonprofits can do it.
Well, one thing I didn't hear a lot of is maybe a little more numbers on paper in terms of the potential addition to county coffers, which I am very afraid are on a path that doesn't look good, especially if the nuclear plant goes out and we decide not to ship gas. What then? And when I say go out, I don't know that any other nuclear plant has been re-upped the third time. And so if there is opportunity to get people from the outside to drop their money here, that could be a good thing. I don't know if it's an immense amount of money. I don't have a feel for any of that stuff. How money comes and goes in and out, but maybe if the farmers and others that have a problem with it say, hey, if we lose some of our sources of income, then the taxes are going to go up on everybody.
So part of the evil plot though is I want to get the farmers to make some money off of it with these primitive campsites and the direct access to water, because they can charge for it. I'm not saying that all of these have to be free and open to the public. They can charge for these access points, and then you would hope and expect they wouldn't be as opposed.
Right. But maybe Parks and Rec could throw in a little bit of money for maintenance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping.
I better get my foot healed up quick. It sounds like we got some good stuff.
But and really part of this discussion is I really want you guys to be thinking about this and either email me directly or I'm going to try to pull together a little mini survey form, like a half a pager, to people, asking them a couple of questions. And if you can think of stuff, please fill it out and get it back to me. It'll come to you in the next day or two. But think big. I mean, I think, see, we've got into this pattern, and this pattern is new in the human's life, in the long specter of life on Earth for humans, and that only recently have we viewed land the way we do now, and that is just as this anything that's not developed is just open land waiting for development. And really, when get an appraisal done on your land, and I'll guarantee you, if you have farmland, they will say the highest and best use is a subdivision. Now, let me tell you, for the benefit of the world, that is not the highest and best use, folks. But we've got to stop thinking of undeveloped land as a commodity. And so by really touting our natural assets and making green income off of it, we try to turn that notion around to say, no, it's benefit. It's more than the aesthetic value. There's an economic value to it, and that's important for our jurisdictions. Yeah, imagine a thought that, commissioners talking about green infrastructure, for example, they always have a capital budget. And what if they start talking about what we need to do to maintain our wetlands and have better water quality and protecting macroinvertebrates? That really is the green infrastructure that's needed for green tourism. That would be a novel thought to come before the county commissioners. Well, we want to keep these things short. We've gone 45 minutes now, and I hate to for all you to start thinking this thing, by God, is boring. So, Robin, maybe we should close it at this point, unless somebody has one more closing thought, and then I can send you out the jot form for your ideas.
I was going to say that's a good idea. People can certainly continue to respond using the jot form or emails directly to Greg. And I for one, would want to go back and re-listen again with that idea in mind. So once we get the video posted, you'll get a link to that too. So thanks everyone for attending. I appreciate it.